Hello everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Kerbal Space Program .25. Playing Economic Boom here, and this is our Dres mini-series, episode 3 I believe of it. So last episode what we did was we got ourselves a nice encounter with Dres. It's right down to about 3 million, 2 million, something like that. It tells me a different number every time I look at it. Basically what we did was we made our Dres burn, and then at the ascending node we corrected our inclination right down. So we are basically right along that plane, and we are set up for a nice encounter with this small little planetoid. So in this episode we're going to try to get all the way out there and make ourselves basically captured by that. Get our capture burn, capture orbit. And we're swinging along. We're right about at Duna's orbit now. Let's take a look. Yeah, it looks like the Duna sun, doesn't it? So it's not quite the same without Duna here. Actually, Duna is no, it's about a quarter of the way that way. I always thought that'd be neat if on one of these transfer orbits that one of the other planets would be like right there. Chances of that are extremely rare, but it would be cool if that happened one of these days. So here we are. As you can see, we're basically running parallel with Dres. We're orbiting about 7,000 meters per second and falling. Dres is at about 4,800. So basically we're speeding up on it, but our speed is falling relative to Dres. So eventually it's going to even out. And as you can see, we had to go a little bit past Dres's orbit because we are going to be a little bit ahead of it, as you can see. But these burns out to the outer solar system always intrigue me, because here we are at maximum warp, 100,000 times, and it seems like we're just crawling through the solar system. Very much the opposite of when we went in towards the sun over to like Moho or Eve over there. Those transfer orbits took probably half the time, because as you get closer to the sun you go faster and faster, but now as we're going farther away from the sun our velocity just continues to fall more and more, so it just makes these trips so long. Like, we're already at a year. We've been in space for a year now, over a year. These Kerbals must be really good at keeping themselves busy. Maybe it's all the snacks that they have in their little landing can there. As you can see, we're way ahead of Dres now, but our velocity is slower than it. Now it's basically a full 1,000 meters per second faster than us, as you can see. Dres is just going to start catching up on us now. It's going to look like Dres suddenly hit the gas pedal. But really what's happening is we're slowing down. We're hitting the brakes subjectively, so to speak. And we're allowing Dres to catch up on us. But from our relative position, it looks like the opposite is true. And there's Elu right over there. Elu's hanging out. We'll go to Elu one of these days. Elu is really messed up off the ecliptic path. Very inclined, very, eccentric in its orbit. This is going to be a bit of a challenge to get to Elu, but I've been to Elu once before in a probe. I've never actually been there with a manned crew, so that'll be something interesting to look forward to. And we're basically coming up on our encounter now, very soon. Just about there. As you can see, Dres is now really speeding up on us, because we've slowed down quite a bit. Dres is staying at that constant velocity, basically. We're going to get our encounter right about here. And then we can further correct how we want this encounter to look once we get out there. And we have about 26 seconds, about 800 meters per second to basically slow down and fix whatever we need to fix. Wow, you can really see it accelerating up on us now. Wonder if it's possible to see it. Let's see. Dres is basically towards the sun, off to the left a little bit. Should be over here somewhere. Difficult to spot if we're not pointing right at it. That's okay. Go a little bit further. Passing the descending node, which is 0.01, but that's fine. It's quite close enough for me. Oh, there it is. It's right over there. That little speck. So as you can see, we're fairly close to it, but it's very tiny. It's a very small little place. Like I said, it's barely even considered a planet. It's probably got its planet status revoked, like poor Pluto in our solar system. That's okay. I grew up in the 90s, so Pluto is still a planet to me. I'll still call it a planet. How dare they take away Pluto's planet status like that? Such a good planet. Anyways, here we come. Just about at the encounter now. Just gonna slowly get in there. Alright. It's very, very small still, so as you can see, yes, we are going to basically be going around it the proper direction, which is very nice. But what I might do first is just bring us in closer towards it before we do anything crazy. And we are relatively lined up across the ecliptic. It's, you know, up is up and down is down. That's pretty good. So we'll get it to about, oh, I don't know. Down to about there, 620,000. So we'll just basically pointing the ship straight in towards it. Do a little physical time warp just to get us out there. This thing's so cumbersome, you kind of need to. Kind of need to do it like that, even though it's bending a good bit right at that little joint there. Alright, it's going to only be about 5-second burn. Nothing too crazy, nothing we can't handle. So we'll just get that underway. Go at about 1/3 thrust. Just to ease it in there. We don't even need to look at this really. We just kind of look at our orbital stats. We can look at the periapsis here. We're just going to want to get it into maybe 500,000. Just to get it nice and close now while we're far away. It'll be more efficient that way. And bam, there we go. And so just like Moho now, we're going to want to just put a maneuver in and try to slow down. Which is, oof, it's really going to take a good bit of fuel, as you can see. Just going to want to pull it in just a little more. Yeah, wow, it's such a small world, like I said, that it's just, wow, it's going to take a good 1,200 meters per second. So we're going to get about half of that done with this craft here. And the other half of it we'll have to do with these tanks up here. Now, I did use a Delta V calculator, so I think we should be good on fuel, hopefully. It's just the return trip that we got to worry about. We got to get down to the surface and back. But of course, we could always sound out another refueling mission if we needed to. I'd like to try to avoid that because that got rather expensive. Like really quickly, it got very expensive. So I'm not sure if we are going to want to really do that necessarily. Alright, let's just get a little forward. We'll move in towards this tiny little ball. And this burn is going to take about 43 seconds with this engine, but that engine's only going to last for about half of that. So probably going to want to burn a little bit sooner than that. But not too soon, let's see. Ooh, wow, it's really moving in fast now. We got about a day to escape until we escape this thing. Alright, I think about right there we're going to start nuking this thing. Just lighten the fires up. Trying to get as much done with this engine as we possibly can. Again, it's not going to be a whole lot. It's going to maybe be half. Got about 5 seconds left before we have to cut this thing off and rely on our nuclear engines. And there we go. So you can see now we're barely accelerating at anything. Let's see, we're accelerating at, well, it doesn't say how many G's we're accelerating at, but it's like a fraction of a G. And it's going to take another about 4 minutes to complete this thing. So So what I might do actually is just wait until we are indeed about 4 minutes out from the mark. Let's reset that node and get that thing in a little bit closer. 4.5 minutes, we'll go at, oh, I don't know, that 3 minutes, something like that. Maybe 2.5 minutes. Yeah, that makes more sense. I can do math sometimes. Sometimes I can. And my excuse for not being able to do math is I'm a music major. I didn't really have to learn that much math. Alright. Go at about, like I said, about 2.5 minutes should do us. Light it up. And I do want to keep it far away from Dres for the moment, just so that we can really get this thing inclination-wise straight across the equator. And it's better to do that when you're kind of far away from the gravity well here, but that's basically us around Dres. That's a nice screenshot. Basically same maneuvers as we were around Moho. These planets that don't have an atmosphere, they're a little tougher to get to, honestly, just for this very reason. You gotta slow down, you gotta waste a lot of fuel just to slow down enough to get around it. We can do a little physical time warp just to speed things along. This ship kind of crunches together when you do that. It kind of freaks me out sometimes. But, so let's do a little cut just to make sure you guys don't get too bored. Alright, now as you can see, the orbit's now really bending around. We're getting right down towards the end of that burn. We could probably start to go at a more reasonable time warp. We can go back down to normal time, just as we finish off the last 30 seconds or so of this burn. As we pull that orbit in closer. So it looks like we've got a little notification here. We'll read that in a sec. Just want to make sure that this thing does indeed get right down to a sort of circular type of orbit. Doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but right about there. We'll keep it right there. Very good. So that's us in orbit, and we have about 35 basically minutes left of burn in this entire craft. That's very good. We've done about 6,500 meters per second total, which I think should be enough to do everything we have to do and get back home again. Hopefully, right? That's all you can really hope for. But let's read the notification. Achieve orbit around Dres complete. Very good. Now it says it gave us a little extra money, but it says we've lost reputation. Now I'm wondering, is that really going to affect our reputation? Like, is it subtracting 126 reputation? I'm not really sure, honestly. And I think if I'm reading this correctly, did that subtract like a lot of reputation? Are we almost to the yellow now? That can't be right, because that's like one mission, and we went all the way from like 100% down to basically 0 again. That can't be right. I'm gonna just assume that that's wrong. All right, but let's go ahead and let's do our science. Again, science doesn't really matter a whole lot anymore because we've basically completed the tree, but it's still fun to do these things. See a massive canyon on the surface. It could be several kilometers deep, indeed. So we'll send that back, and hopefully we don't get negative science from that. 35 science added. We'll have to see. You know, if this turns out to be a disaster with our reputation, I'm just going to cancel that agreement with Mortimer, because I feel like that just can't be right. I mean, what's the point of committing to it if it's just going to subtract you right down to 0 reputation? It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, let's do the EVA from High Dres. We've recorded the observations. We get 56 science from that. Very nice. And again, I'm going to save these 2 bigger science modules for when we get a nice lower orbit. But first, let's see, where does this orbit cross the middle? Roughly right about here. Let's see if we can just make this thing some sort of equatorial orbit. It's tough to gauge it when you don't have like the ascending and the descending nodes telling you where it is. That's still not quite perfect, I don't think. Very tough to read it, but we could start with something like that. That looks a little better, doesn't it? It's a start. It looks a little better. So we'll start with that one. And this thing moves a lot easier now that we've gotten rid of that big giant booster, which technically should... It's probably long gone by now. I was going to see if it ejected itself from the Dres system. It probably did. Alright, it's coming up in 25 minutes. Let's go ahead and just get to that location. Oh, we've gone right past it. Oh my. I always seem to do that. That's alright. You can see it's fixing it a bit. Where else can we do it? Maybe right about here, maybe? It might be a little better. It always looks good from like this angle, and then you go and you look from the other way and it's not so good anymore. But we'll go ahead and do that one. This time we will not miss it. Oh, look, Dres does have a little bit of a rotation. That's pretty interesting. Most planets do have rotation. Some of them are tidally locked in there. Alright, let's do this one. That's relatively equatorial, wouldn't you agree? I think so. Alright, so the only thing left to do is get this thing down to maybe... Oh, I don't know, we want to get some kind of low orbit. 50. Let's try 50. Do something like that. Just basically getting us in a low orbit, circular low orbit. That'll help us out. We can get that low orbit data. Basically gonna wait till we get to the apoapsis or periapsis, whichever one's coming up. Looks like apoapsis. There we are. Relatively close to it now. Here we go. Basically just slowing ourselves down. Slowing down the orbit. And luckily it doesn't cost too much fuel around Dres, because Dres is quite small, so any of these little maneuvers are going to be way more efficient than if it were, say, around Moho or Eve especially, or Joule even. 51. And we just want to swing around. Still not a perfect equatorial orbit, which is bugging me a little bit. It's so hard to gauge it. We'll just swing around here and we'll get this thing into a circle. It'll probably be easier to tell once we get a little closer. Yeah, we'll be able to see where it crosses the equator a little bit easier. So we'll just swing around, we'll find that maneuver node. And we'll just swing in there nice and close. Wow. Getting real close now. I love it. You can actually see these surface features. I think it deserves a screenshot right there. What do you guys think? I think so too. Man, that looks so cool. Very, very nice. Just a little bit further and we will get this thing into a circle. A low orbit circle. Here we are. Just burning opposite direction we're moving, slowing our orbit down. We're basically pushing against the mass of our ship, our momentum, pushing right against it. Very cool concepts, this whole rocket science and space travel, very interesting. So outside of our normal human understanding, like our normal day-to-day understanding here on Earth. Couldn't possibly conceive of these things until we got out there. Well, some of us did. Some of the geniuses, Newton, Galileo, Copernicus, Kepler, they all knew this stuff. They just had to wait till society to catch up. Anyways, it's kind of shaking around a little bit. Let's see if we can... Oh, we want to go this way, actually. That looks a little better. Maybe not quite as good. That looks a bit better, doesn't it? I think it's a little more circular. Or rather, a little more equatorial, if you ask me. Oop. There I go again, blasting right by the node. I'm famous for doing that. Or infamous, either one. So this will be our last correction burn, and after that we're set up now for a landing. Which we won't do in this episode, because we're just about out of time. But tell you what, that's what you can look forward to in the next episode of Kerbal Space Program, once we do this last little maneuver here. That'll be it for this episode. Go at about half thrust. Just to get that orbit as close as we can over the equator. There we go. And that'll help us out when we land. And it'll basically get us back into space again. Let's see if we can do any sort of near Dres science. Let's take a look. Crew report. Oh, it still considers us high over Dres. So the next episode we're going to have to lower this even further, believe it or not, and get some of that low orbit data. And that's when we'll also land on Dres. So look forward to that in the next episode, everybody. Thank you for watching.